One of the amazing parts of this whole project is the fact that people recognize the significance of St. Luke's and the importance of the Bridger family to the history of this site and the history of White Marsh and the families that were active here in the past. Back in 2006, when I first met with the Bridger family, they were having a reunion, and it was just kind of the beginning formation of this group of relatives. I met with them because for much of the research that I do, I don't always know who the person is. Many of them are unknown, and many of them were very lower status individuals in terms of their economics. They were indentured servants. Many people came over and died very quickly, and we were seeing those remains at the different archaeological sites that were being investigated. But rarely did I have the opportunity to actually be involved in someone who I knew the name of that person. And on top of that, in this particular case, he was a very well-off individual. He was a very prominent individual, Colonel Joseph Bridger, in the 17th century. And from that, it was an opportunity to not only look at the lives of regular folks, but also to see what it was like for someone that is extremely high status.
Well, a lot of descendants are still here. I mean, it's amazing, but 14 generations are still in the same area. And we always say that Joseph Bridger is the most famous Virginian that nobody knew about. He was kind of in obscurity because there were no paintings of him. And a lot of the 17th century really important men, there's paintings. And if there was one, which consider his standing in the colony, there probably was one, but it was probably lost, just like his manor house was lost. You know, it just crumbled. We were hoping that they would get enough of his skull to do a facial reconstruction. However, when they opened the small box where the bones were, there was not enough of his skull. There was only part of his jaw and the top of the skull.
What really came about is much of a mystery in the sense that through these previous excavations, when we worked at this secondary burial of Colonel Bridger, one of the things that we realized is that much of the skeleton was missing. It was not all there. Where could it be? And so that led to the excavation of his grave at White Marsh, archaeological excavations by Alan Outlaw, the archaeologist in charge of this project, could ultimately locate that burial, locate the burial that also had one of these ledger stones, Anne Randall next to him, and in investigating that, determined that everything had been taken out. So I go back to, where is the rest of it? And the family has wondered, where is the rest of this? Because they would love, if in an ideal world, they would love to be able to do that facial reconstruction. And they started thinking, well, maybe if it's not the remains all in this one that got put under the Joseph Bridger ledger, that maybe they're in the grave with the woman who is an in-law of his, and maybe they're there.
And we knew Anne Randall was buried next to him, but we didn't know who Anne Randall was at the time. So we didn't feel that we had the right to go in and exhume her. So then our genealogist, Janet Ross, got to go on her genealogy skills, and she discovered that Anne Randall was actually Hester Pitt's aunt. Hester Pitt was Joseph Bridger's wife. So she had been married 4 times, and she had no children. So there were no descendants that we needed to contact to get permission to exhume her.
The Bridger Family Association has left literally no stone unturned. Literally, we looked under both of these stones, the Joseph Bridger stone in the chancel here and the Anne Randall stone, for clues on their physical characteristics. Once we got to where we could actually see what was in the crypt, it was the sort of deja vu with the Bridger story that the remains were fewer than we had hoped, but they were well preserved, and we had the cranial vault, which was similar to what we had with the Bridger grave.
For years, we're giving tours and we're telling people about Joseph Bridger and Anne Randall without knowing who she was. So it was so important for us to find out some information. So initially, she was exhumed, thinking that perhaps some of Joseph Bridger's remains, since we had so little of it, might be under her ledger stone. As it turns out, it looks like they are all bones of Anne Randall.
I'm very interested in her. I'm interested in Anne because, as I say, it is rare that we maybe are able to identify an individual by name, and we're getting better at that. I'm actually using genetic methods to identify people by name. But whereas I have a number of individuals that are males and I can tell their story, when you look at it in terms of the female story is such that they're living in the shadows of their husbands. So this is an opportunity that we can learn about a high status woman, Anne Randall. The Bridger family, in all of their very good genealogical work, knows now that she has had 4 husbands. And so I'm interested in her story. I really, the things that she can tell me in terms of her isotope values, her exposure to different types of heavy metals like lead poisoning, things like that, that all fits into my broader Chesapeake region story of lives in the 17th century.
I've worked through a lot of cemeteries and individual burials, and almost all the time you do not know who that person was, the year they died, or their social status. We have all that already here set up. So one of the things we can do is measure lead content in the bones and come up with the parts per million of that and link that to a high status individual so that when we find a skeleton with no history to it, literally, we can suggest the status of that individual. Having individuals of sort of known quantity and named, that's important in establishing that baseline for the rest of the Chesapeake, where virtually everyone else, we don't know who they were.
Nobody can say they've dug up their 10th great grandfather and tested DNA. That just doesn't happen. So this is very unique. Joseph Bridger is a very important man in history, and we want to honor him and do whatever we can to make him known to Virginia and the world.
There were not that many large church buildings like this one that Joseph Bridger's finances helped to construct. Brick was very expensive, very labor intensive, and so it required a wealthy patron like Joseph Bridger to complete a building like this.
The church has been very, very willing partners in the sense that they also have questions about the individuals that are buried here. And they have been willing, with complete enthusiasm and support from the family, they have been willing to recognize that this work could be done. It is obtrusive, but then it can be, restored, and restored with the idea that we will now know more. This concept of colonial Chesapeake history, you just get pulled into it. And that, of course, is their story too. They know that they have the history of Isle of Wight County and everything here. They've been superb partners to work with.
We are trying to pursue as much of a body of genealogical records as we can find for the parish. What was life like for the average parishioner here? What happens between 1607 and the Revolutionary War is crucially important in understanding who we are as Americans today. A lot of our DNA and a lot of what we still struggle with today comes out of this vital time period in which Bridger was a very important figure and a very well-known figure in the colony. So studying this time period, I think, is really crucially important for us. So these stories of people like Joseph Bridger and Anne Randall help us to understand a very vital period of our history.
This is a story of families' interest in their past. This is a story for this volume that I'm working on in Life in the Colonial Chesapeake, and this is part of the genetic work that we've done from the bones of Colonel Bridger, for instance. The science is evolving so rapidly that the amount of information that I can determine from an individual, it will not tell me everything. It will not tell me about their thoughts, but in the same sense, it will tell me who they were, much about their life. And it is a fascinating story. And it is a fascinating story that I think is an opportunity to learn about someone that nobody wrote any written records about. We don't know who they are, but the bones, if you listen very carefully and use modern science, you can tell a lot about them. who they were and what their life was like. And I find those personal stories fascinating.